Chair recognizes the honourable member for Cat Island, Rum Kingston, Salvador.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. As I said, I rise to on the issue relating to the point of privilege communicated by the member for Carmichael in respect to certain statements or from an article issued by Jerome Fitzgerald on the 22nd of September 2017.
Yeah.
Firstly, I point out that the point of privilege relates to a matter stemming from an earlier communication made by the minister or the member for Carmichael. In that communication, certain suggestions and innuendos could very well glean from that implicated the former member for Marathon in his capacity as a minister of the government. And that inspired the response and the communication and press release. Now, the genesis of that relates to a contract that was awarded to his father, and I would invite the minister to that was issued according to the minister in September 2015. There was no contract issued on that date in that month to the member's father. It's accepted that one was issued in September 2012, but not 2015. And the question arises as why you would want to rein the date into 2015 at this time. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the member is no longer, he's a private citizen, no longer in the House of Assembly, no longer occupies an official capacity. And even if it is claimed that he did, or he's being spoken of in his official capacity, the rules required that notice be given to yourself about the content of any allegation that would relate to that person's character before it could be, and you had to give leave, as it were, for them to state, and I don't know that had happened. But in any event, I posited on the basis that Mr. Jerome Fitzgerald is now a private citizen, and it is not proper or appropriate for us to speak to him or to his character in any demeaning way. And that offends, I think, Rule 33, subsections, I think, 22 and 23 of our parliamentary rules. Now, I also draw attention to the fact that the minister speaks to the manner in which he conducts his utterances in this House. He says, and I quote, I so carefully check, this is at page 4, paragraph 2 of this statement, I so carefully check, double check, and triple check every word that I utter in this place.
What page is that?
Page 4.
Page 4?
Yes, second paragraph.
Yes.
If that is so, I'm constrained to ask whether he checked the source of his information as it relates to his adopting that information in his statement when he says at paragraph 5, page 5, paragraph 4, when he says, I find this condition necessary, sir, because I reliably I am reliably informed that in the year and a half, this is what I'm saying, listen to what he said, Mr. Speaker. I'm reliably informed that in the year and a half since the Supreme Court issued its ruling against Mr. Fitzgerald, Mr. Fitzgerald has not paid the $150,000 fine, and indeed may be relying on the government to pay it for him, as well as his legal costs. First of all, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Fitzgerald was not sued in his personal capacity. He was sued as a minister of government. That matter raised important constitutional issues in respect to privilege in this House. Right? I agree with the minister's comments about the ancient and honored privileges that we enjoy in this House. But unfortunately, that privilege somehow seemed to have been curtailed by the very decision to which he refers to that ordered the payment of $150,000. That was on appeal. That appeal was withdrawn. And so we are now seemingly bound by the limitation on that privilege. So it is not as wide as he may think. And so it is, Mr. Speaker, if one would have looked at the complete statement issued by Mr. Fitzgerald, he never said that he was going to sue the minister. What he said is that the minister ought to be cautious as to how he engaged in the use of his privilege in this House. My characterization is because he may find that that privilege to which he thinks he's enjoying may not be permitted, having regard to the ruling that was made earlier by Justice Charles some year and a half ago. The $150,000 was not ordered for Mr. Fitzgerald in his personal capacity to be paid, but was ordered for him to pay it as Minister of Government. That's the first point. And then the second point, if he had checked, if he had double checked, and if he had triple checked, he would have found that the Court of Appeal, before allowing the withdrawal of the appeal, got the government to indicate that Mr. Fitzgerald was not personally liable for that $150,000. And so I invite the member to check, double check, triple check those matters which have drawn to his attention, and then perhaps make the necessary corrections if we deem it fit at the earliest opportunity that he may. Because the court records are there in the Court of Appeal. He got the information. He said, I'm reliably informed, and so I'm suggesting to him that the source of that information is questionable. And if he was checking, double checking, and triple checking, all he needed to do is check what happened in the Court of Appeal at the time when the parties appeared in respect to what the consequences were of the application to withdraw and what conditions under which it was permitted to be withdrawn. And he would note that this is nothing more than bullwash. And so, Mr. Speaker, I invite him to review those matters and make the necessary corrections, and then consider whether, in the circumstances, his privilege was in fact breached.
Honorable member for Cat Island from Kingston, Salvador. Are you seeking any position from the chair with respect to this?
I just raised the matter for the House, um, the House would not be able to, I think, take a position until you would have heard a response from the other side in respect to it. I don't know whether they will be in a position to do so now, but I raised it, it's on the record, and it is for the member to whom I drew these matters, to whose attention I drew it to decide whether he leave it as is or respond in an appropriate time.
Honorable member, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael.
Speaker, I had the honor of walking in here this afternoon and being able to speak to the Honorable Henry Bostwick. And as a young lawyer, it was wonderful for me to be able to go in courtrooms and watch Mr. Bostwick and watch the member opposite ply their craft. Both of them were outstanding advocates, and the manner in which the member for Cat Island has spoken certainly speaks well of his advocacy. I was very deliberate in what I said, Mr. Speaker. Very deliberate. Notwithstanding that, I have no difficulty checking and rechecking what I've checked and rechecked before. I have read that judgment, which is a very long one, which is very clear in what it said. So I have no difficulty looking at it again. That is the nature of what we do. And so I will look at it again. But as for now, I stand by every word I said. And particularly, sir, what is very important for me is to let anyone know, and I know that that the Honorable Member for Cat Island is now saying that there was no intention to file legal proceedings against me. But I want everybody to know that when I stand in this place, I do not stand behind any privilege, notwithstanding the privileges that are guaranteed to me. Because I'm going to say things that I have checked. And I'm not going to hide behind privilege. And I am not going to permit anyone to publicly attack me and to make those allegations in relation to privilege. And so I have always, as I indicated, always admired the advocacy of the member for Cat Island. And he has done it again this afternoon. And in my profession, someone told me the other day, Mr. Speaker, that lawyers have strange rules because senior lawyers don't call junior lawyers, and junior lawyers have to go to the chambers of senior lawyers, and all kinds of other strange rules. And so, and yes, I've seen lawyers who are very strong and hefty, leaving young ladies walking behind them carrying heavy bags. And so I will listen to his counsel, but I want to make it very, very clear that when I stand up in Parliament, I'm not going to stand behind any privilege. I'm not going to hide behind any privilege. I'm not going to be a coward for privilege. I'm going to speak my mind, and if anybody seeks to attack me, I'm going to make myself available because I stand on the truth. That's what Carmichael put me here for. And so, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for your patience. I thank you for permitting me to raise my matter of privilege. The honourable member raised the issue with respect to the rule privilege. There's a permissive rule with respect to privilege in our local rules, but there's also tremendous guidance to be gained with respect from what Mays says on the issue. And before I raised that, and before I sought leave, and I assure you, the honourable member, that I did seek leave, and I did comply with the rules fully, and I was granted leave. But Mays is very instructive on this process that I followed today. I sought to follow that process as faithfully as I understand it in Mays. And once again, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for your patience. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, honourable member. We now proceed with the order of business for the remainder of the day. Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentations of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
May it please you, Mr. Speaker, I rise and beg leave to introduce and read for the first time the following bills. A bill for an act to establish a body to be known as the National Intelligence Agency and to provide for the functions, powers, organization, and management for the connected purpose.
Is there a seconder?
Is the second bill?
We do them one at a time.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that
Yeah. Everything.
it's been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read for the first time. A bill for an act to establish a body to be known as the National Intelligence Agency and to provide for its functions, powers, organization, and management, and for the connected purposes.
A bill for an act to establish a body to be known as the National Intelligence Agency and to provide for its functions, powers, organization, and management, and for connected purposes.
For the first reading of bills.
May it please you, Mr. Speaker, I rise and beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to provide for the interception of communication and the provision of information for interception in the Bahamas and for related matters.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that following bill be read for the first time. Order that the bills be brought up. A bill for an act to provide for the interception of communications and the provision of information for interception in the Bahamas and for related matters.
A bill for an act to provide for the interception of communications and the provision of information for interception in the Bahamas and for related matters.
For the first reading of bills.
With your leave, Mr. Speaker, I would just like to say, there are none, Mr. Speaker, but with your leave, may I just say a few words in relation to these bills?
Brief explanation of the purpose for the
Very well.
bill?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead, Honorable
Thank you
Member.
very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as this Honorable House, and most certainly Mr. Speaker would very well know, that our government, during the speech of the throne, had given certain undertakings, and that is to lay a compendium of bills. And so in keeping with our promise to run a transparent and accountable government, we have laid these bills for the purpose of public discussion and consultation. So at this stage, we're inviting members from civil society and most certainly the Bahamas Bar Association to bring a critical eye to these pieces of legislation so that at the end of the day, we would have something that would be able to take the Bahamas to another level. Mr. Speaker, you would agree that in the past we had an agency being run without legislation, and that was the National Intelligence Unit Agency, and this government had undertaken to abide by the law and by the rule of law. And so, in keeping with that precept, we brought this bill here today. The Interception of Communications Bill. Mr. Speaker, when I was in another place as bar president, I was vociferous in my commentary on the introduction of this bill without first having open and honest public discourse on this bill. And I'm happy today that my leader and my party has now presented this bill with some alterations, hoping that at the end of the day, members of the public will have an opportunity to review this bill and assist the government in producing, in accordance with our constitutional duties, that is to make laws for the good of the Bahamas, to assist us in producing proper legislation for the Bahamas. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the member for Cat Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador.
I'm just trying to understand, having heard the member from Yamacraw, he referred to the fact that he was very vociferous in objections to the process in which the bill was produced initially. And he alluded to the fact that his objection was rooted in the fact that there was not wide consultation in the process. And I'm asking whether, before it was laid today, whether that happened, or it is intended to happen before we debate it going forward. And if that applies to both bills.
It's
Chair
intended to happen.
recognizes the member for Yamacraw.
Thank you. It's intended to happen before we debate, but my government and my prime minister is very proactive. Copies of these bills would have already been sent to some of to the Bahamas Bar Association and a number of other agencies for them to have sight of it. As a matter of fact, I don't see Mr. Marta Aubrey here today, but he's one of the leading members in civil society, and we've kept him up to date on all of these processes.
I share the view that you want to share communications. But it is that when you criticize a process and you do the same thing, it comes off hypocritical. So there's nothing wrong with laying the bill and at the same time having a consultation. So the objection may have been, now that you've laid the bill, give us an opportunity to review it, to make suggestions, as you're now asking, as opposed to scrap it altogether.
I've learned one good lesson from my dearly beloved father, and that is, there are certain things I'm not going to dignify with a response. I've laid these bills. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Second reading on committal of bills. Moving right along. Second reading on committal of bills. Committee of the whole House. Third reading on passing of bills. Consideration of Senate amendments. Resolutions. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I moved and resolved that a humble address be presented to Her Excellency the Governor General, thanking her for her most gracious speech at the opening of Parliament. And at this stage, Mr. Speaker, the member for Marathon will be our first speaker, and we'll move the resolution.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marathon.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move the following resolution. Be it resolved that a humble address be presented to Her Excellency, the Governor General, thanking her for her most gracious speech at the opening of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, members of this Honorable House, colleagues, friends, my fellow Bahamians and residents, good afternoon. Mr. Speaker, I rise to thank the Governor General, Dame Marguerite Pinling, for her speech from the throne. But before I proceed, Mr. Speaker, first let me thank the residents of Marathon, whose expressions of love and support have truly been the wind beneath my wings, Mr. Speaker, and I am grateful for the privilege that they have bestowed upon me, and I wish to assure them that the trust that they have placed in me is not and never will be taken for granted. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to congratulate my leader, the Honorable Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis, for his courage in leadership. The Prime Minister has been quoted as saying that we as a people need to reset our national course. We need a new era of reform and transformation. We need to transform mindsets and practices which have not served us well, end quote. Mr. Speaker, transformation means to go beyond the boundaries that we have set, to expand beyond the beliefs that we hold, Mr. Speaker. And it's with that in mind that I lend my full support to the decision to reach out to the Commonwealth of Dominica. Mr. Speaker, I, for one, was disgusted and appalled at some of the comments I saw on social media and heard on the talk shows in relation to this decision. And it is clear to me that we as a people need to reset our moral compass. How do you sit by and watch our brothers and sisters in Dominica suffer whilst we do nothing? This is not an issue of us against them. This is an issue of embracing our own humanity, Mr. Speaker, acknowledging beyond words and empty rhetoric that we are our brother's keeper and acting on that belief. Mr. Speaker, love is a verb that calls us to action. We will be judged as a people by what we do to assist others in their times of need. Let us not forget that as an expression of gratitude to Almighty God for being spared the full ravages of Hurricane Irma on our beloved nation, we should reach out to those that were most impacted and whose lives have been totally decimated through no fault of their own, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is not to say, nor are we in any way whatsoever suggesting, that we will not reach out to our fellow Bahamians who have been impacted. But we have a duty, Mr. Speaker, beyond the Committee of Nations to help. The government has already indicated that we are committed to restoring and rebuilding those islands, those settlements and communities that were most impacted by Hurricane Irma. And we will do just that. Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to quote an ancient proverb. No tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. Mr. Speaker, we are all branches of the same tree, of post-slavery, post-colonialism countries. Indeed, I congratulate the Prime Minister on challenging the country to reset its mindset based on love, because only love can conquer hate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, turning my attention to the Ministry of Environment and Housing for a moment, I'd like to use this opportunity to address the nation on the work done thus far as we chart the way forward to transform the practices within my ministry. As you are aware, the government has made a decision to issue another request for proposal in relation to the deconstruction and remediation of the landfill site, the New Providence landfill, thus replacing the exercise that was conducted by the previous administration, which gave proposed bidders 10 days, inclusive of site visits, to submit proposals, which were due 19 days before the May 10th general election. Mr. Speaker, that exercise resulted in 2 bids being submitted at opposite ends of the spectrum. One of the proposals focused solely on the management of the landfill and sought to gain revenue through tipping fees and recyclables, and would have required the government to pay approximately $800,000 a year in annual management fees, Mr. Speaker. The second proposal was based primarily on the deconstruction and reconstruction of the landfill, establishing a waste-to-energy plant, which ultimately would be sold to the grid. Mr. Speaker, we are well on our way to finalizing the request for proposal, and it should be issued before the end of the year. Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention to Clifton Pier. As we are aware, this is a heavily impacted site which the government is both committed and dedicated and determined to address. We understand the issues, and we'll be calling on industry partners to assist as we take the lead with the restoration and remediation at Clifton Pier. Mr. Speaker, our consultants have clearly adumbrated the challenges, and we are now at the stage of designing the remediation system to put in place to recover the product. We have completed the tendering exercise in this regard, and we hope to commence work very shortly. Mr. Speaker, when we speak of transformation, we must also address the transformation of the legislative landscape to empower the Ministry of Environment to carry out its duties, particularly the duties expected of it by the public. For example, Mr. Speaker, the public has an expectation of the Ministry of Environment and Housing to collect garbage in New Providence when, under the present framework, garbage collection in New Providence is privatized. Thus, we don't do collections in New Providence. And in a family island scenario, garbage collection is controlled, and maintenance of the roadsides is controlled by the island administrator. Allow me to illustrate the quagmire that we find ourselves in, Mr. Speaker, by using Clifton Pier as an analogy. Once the fuel has been bunkered into the tanks at Clifton Pier, it becomes the responsibility and obligation of whomever tanks they are. If there is a leak in the fuel and it migrates vertically to the water table, as all groundwater resources, Mr. Speaker, fall under the purview of the Water and Sewage Corporation. If that product moves horizontally and reaches the coast and harbor, then it becomes the responsibility of the port department. If that oil sinks to the sea bottom, then we all are aware that the sea bottom is in fact submerged land, and all Crown land is held on trust for the benefit of the Bahamian people by the Prime Minister. If we want to excavate a recovery trench to effect remediation, then we need an excavation permit pursuant to the Conservation and Protection of the Physical Landscapes of the Bahamas Act, which is issued by the Ministry of Works. I use this as an example, Mr. Speaker, to highlight the urgent need for environmental protection laws, and we are aware of this need. Mr. Speaker, my ministry is preparing primary legislation which will act as a precursor to an Environmental Protection Act, empowering the Minister of Environment to issue regulations to govern all aspects of environmental management. Mr. Speaker, last week I stood in this honorable House and I advised the government and I advised the public that the government, through its agencies, the Ministry of Environment, Parks and Beaches Authority, and its industry partners, intends to engage in an island-wide cleanup of New Providence and the Family Islands. We are committed to transforming the mindsets of Bahamians towards the natural and built environments. We therefore ask all concerned citizens to organize themselves into groups and team up to clean up. This is open, Mr. Speaker, to all churches, civic organizations, and right-thinking Bahamians who yearn for a clean, green, and pristine environment. Mr. Speaker, we cannot expect people to value our country more than we do, Mr. Speaker. We can and we must do this for ourselves. This is a journey we have to do for ourselves. Nobody can do this for us. As a result, I invite all Bahamians to reach out to my ministry for support if needed. We are here for you. Mr. Speaker, we have established a telephone number, 322-6006, and if you're not getting some satisfaction from this number, you can WhatsApp me on my cell phone at 457-0619. Oh yeah, Mr. Speaker, 457-0619. Mr. Speaker, according to the Department of Statistics, the average Bahamian household is headed by a female who earns $16,747 per year. Mr. Speaker, if we take the housing developments done, particularly the one done in the Adastra Gardens subdivision by the last administration, which was done, I believe, in conjunction with Arawak Homes, the cost of these affordable houses was approximately $175,000. This puts the dream of home ownership out of reach for the average Bahamian, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to assure all Bahamians that we are a government that cares. We are determined to wipe every tear from every eye, including the eyes of my leader, the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Mix. Mr. Speaker, we will not rest until the dream of home ownership is available to all. In that regard, we are working to reduce the cost of home ownership, Mr. Speaker, to the average Bahamian. In addition, we are well on our way to finishing the details on the government's rent-to-own program, which we are convinced will do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. In the interim, Mr. Speaker, we will proceed with housing developments in the Fox Hill and Carmichael Road areas. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, at this very moment, the government is in the process of perfecting title and finalizing housing designs for those very same areas. Mr. Speaker, the irreducible of humanity is compassion. And I am so proud to serve in a government and under a Prime Minister who's committed to the compassionate transformation of both the mindsets and the practices of the Bahamian people. I therefore call on all Bahamians, residents and friends of the Bahamas, whether black or white, rich or poor, from this side or that side, to join us. Because, Mr. Speaker, no matter our differences, we are all united by a single thread, which is we want better for ourselves, for our families, for our children, and ultimately our country. And I want to assure all Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, that it is only if we join hands together that we can march forward, onward, and achieve the goal of a better Bahamas and a better country for which we can all justly be proud. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank again Dame Margaret Pinling, our Governor General, for the speech from the throne and her graciousness in delivering the same. I also want to thank again the people of Marathon, my Marathon family. You are a part of me, and I am a part of you, and I am here for you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Long Island.
Mr. Speaker, I proudly rise on behalf of the great, hard-working, resilient, and determined people of Long Island. Mr. Speaker, I also rise to second the motion to thank Her Excellency the Governor General for a most eloquent, forward-thinking, and futuristic speech from the throne. Mr. Speaker, I am privileged to serve in this honorable place. I want to thank Her Excellency the Governor General for giving a speech that highlighted Family Island development, which was of particular concern and is certainly embraced by me. I am particularly moved by the pledge to capitalize on the marketing power of social media by engaging freelance bloggers to generate content and publicity about the Family Islands like Long Island, explore and develop the untapped resources of Family Islands. The pledge, too, where practicable, ensure the purchase of locally manufactured goods and services and other supplies. The pledge to renew the Family Island Incentives Act to promote growth in agriculture and manufacturing and support diversification and growth of agricultural produce among Family Islands and encourage and enhance inter-island trade. I'm also pleased with the pledge to mandate preschool learning for all 2.5-year-olds and to ensure the availability of adequately staffed and equipped preschool facilities in all Family Islands where practicable. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I am most pleased with the pledge to construct, upgrade, and expand state-of-the-art facilities and services. Mr. Speaker, my constituency, Long Island, is in a state of economic decline. Mr. Speaker, entire settlements are dying. Long Island has yet to fully recover from the destruction wreaked by Hurricane Joaquin in 2015. In fact, Mr. Speaker, there are persons who are still waiting for assistance from NEMA, whose homes have been badly damaged and/or destroyed. Year over year, our students graduate and leave to pursue a better life elsewhere. Many never return. I would wish to see that these pledges come to fruition in Long Island. Long Island remains the sleeping giant of the Southern Bahamas. We are hurting, and in terms of development, we feel as though we are the forgotten outsider. Our rate of unemployment, and even more underemployment, leaves much to be desired and highlights the economic challenges our people face. There are not very many opportunities, but for the hotels, which are seasonal and presently closed, our independent nature and love for Long Island, and fishing, Long Islanders would have almost totally abandoned the island. To borrow a word from my grandparents, Long Islanders are scrapping. Mr. Speaker, I again say that we are in desperate need of an international airport. Compared to the Deadman Ski Airport Terminal, even chickens have better coops. Long Island's economy, Mr. Speaker, though also tied to fishing and farming, is driven by tourism. We need urgent airlift to restore an economy that's on life support. An international port of entry, that is by air, is one of the three most pressing capital works the island needs. That is, extending the 4,000-foot runway to about 7,000 or 7,500 feet, construction of a new terminal building to include facilities for customs and immigration, increasing the size of the apron to provide for a larger parking area for aircraft, and enclosing the entire area or the entire airport with chain link fencing. Barring a new airport, we would happily accept appreciable upgrades to the existing facilities. Our greatest challenge in Long Island is the lack of accessibility. We are in desperate need of economic stimulation, and the airport is our best route to that. We have physically canvassed the island and used various websites. In so doing, we have discovered that there are over 60 vacation rentals on the island, 2 major resorts and other smaller resorts and villas. Research shows that, not counting the plethora of empty apartments, there's approximately 200 bedrooms available that can accommodate nearly 440 people every night. It is estimated that a total gross revenue to the island from room rentals and auxiliary activities, based on a 50% occupancy estimate, could be more than $17 million annually. Frankly, the government could consider a public-private partnership, a public offering, much in the way of the Arawak Port development, which Long Islanders across the archipelago would likely oversubscribe in days. Or maybe a multi-million-dollar municipal bond offering for 15 to 30 years, I'd say 5% coupon. Mr. Speaker, taxes now collected on the island, to make a conservative guess, is perhaps in excess of 8 to 10 million per annum, and would likely see an increase with infrastructural improvements, new investment, and people coming back home. Monies raised can assist in repaying any borrowings for this infrastructure. Thousands of new jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities would then be potentially available to Long Islanders. The desperation of Long Islanders for a long-promised international airport has led persons who love Long Island, such as contractor Wade Knowles, to speak about building a terminal free of charge if given the material. In addition to the airport, Mr. Speaker, direct marketing of our island would help us to reach our full potential. What also is happening in Long Island is that our tourist numbers, the numbers recorded by the Ministry of Tourism, does not accurately reflect the tourists that come to Long Island. Because as you know, wherever you stop first, you stop in New Providence or in Exuma and Clare Customs and Immigration, you count towards those islands. So perhaps the Department of Immigration could add maybe a final destination to those cards or whatever is used. Mr. Speaker, with respect to water, in recent months, the Honorable Prime Minister and member for Kalani recommended me to be appointed chairman of the Water and Sewage Corporation. I thank him for that. Whilst the Water and Sewage Corporation continues to face financial challenges, I seek to move the corporation towards a better financial position and reduce losses and leakage, increase collection efficiency, expand water mains on various islands and New Providence to people long without this invaluable amenity, move water and sewage to being regulated by IRCA, better employee or employer-employee relations, better operating performance, customer service and response times, reduce non-revenue water, engage in an extensive customer win-back campaign, and oversee the rollout of a wastewater master plan and rehabilitation of treatment plants. Whilst the budget is currently constrained, this week I, along with the board, reviewed a brief on the extension of water mains in Long Island. I can assure Long Islanders, Mr. Speaker, that phase 1 of the extension of the water mains is on the way. We are a government that is about laying pipes, not water trucks, as the other side famously does. Our Prime Minister pledged that Long Island, from north to south, will receive water. Given that, I will seek his support in attaining greater funding for the extension of the water mains to those parts of Long Island not covered by the CDB loan in the initial phase of the water mains construction. Running water is limited to only a small part of Long Island. You know, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for Cat Island. He wants to be thanked. He's campaigning to be leader again. But should I say for the first time? Mr. Speaker, I note here that Long Island is perhaps the only major island with most of its residents without access to running water. This is especially cost prohibitive when constructing a home. You got to spend anywhere from $20,000 to even $60,000 just for a water holding tank. It hinders development, and it has been an injustice to Long Islanders and other islanders. But I can personally speak to having to bathe in brackish and salt water. You come out of the water and your skin white. And certainly changing fixtures and faucets all the time. Mr. Speaker, the number houses, there's a proliferation of number houses, Mr. Speaker, in Long Island. They have become a cancer in our communities. The economy is already hardly existent. Not many people can be considered to have disposable income, but the number houses are always full. There are persons who are addicted to gambling. This has deepened the socioeconomic challenges we face. Of late, persons have been referred to the Sandlands Rehabilitation Center for treatment for their addictions. But where's the addiction and rehab program that number houses were supposed to launch? There are children who are not attending school without lunch. Sorry, there are children who are attending school without lunch. There are households that are without food and basic amenities due to gambling addictions. Some people gamble their entire paycheck at a number house. Many gamble with the hope of being lucky and bettering their fate. It is locally estimated that 150,000 to 200,000, maybe more, leaves Long Island every month, repatriated to number houses that are headquartered in Nassau. Moreover, it is widely known that bag men come to Long Island almost weekly to pick up money bags from the various number houses. They reportedly walk off the planes, get a bag from someone waiting in a vehicle, quickly check themselves back in, and board the flight with the savings and earnings of residents already struggling to survive. There are between 15 to 20 number houses in Long Island, an island where there's only some 3,000 inhabitants. How can this possibly be explained? The number houses are killing businesses. The number houses are killing the island's economy. We must address their impact on small island communities, Mr. Speaker. It is speculated that the Royal Bank of Canada may pull out of Long Island. We cannot afford to lose our only bank. But what has been the impact of the proliferation of number houses on local banking? What will we, the government, do to mitigate if indeed they do pull out? As it stands, many Long Islanders avoid bank transaction fees by sending and receiving money via number houses. As one Long Islander told me, if you send $20, the person on the receiving end receives $20. The number houses are engaged in banking, but where is the central bank in all of this? Mr. Speaker, since Hurricane Irma, the state of affairs of fishermen in Long Island has worsened. Local fishermen have lost their traps all along the Great Bahama Bank. Thousands of traps and condos are gone. I thank the Prime Minister and the government for the exigency order, and I am sure that this would be of great assistance to our fishermen. In our depressed to non-existent economy, fishing feeds many Long Island families. If fishermen are unable to fish, the island will certainly die. Fishermen continue to call upon the government to clamp down on Dominicans, and I say that's from the Dominican Republic. So I'll say Dominicans, not Dominicans. 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 Fishermen from the DR. Fishermen continue to call upon the government to clamp down on Dominicans working and fishing Bahamian waters. We must take a second look at curbing and or removing the presence of these persons on Bahamian boats. Commercial fishing should be strictly reserved for Bahamians. Fishermen have also been inviting the government to consider extending, or that is shortening, the closed season with respect to the Nassau grouper. And El Bambutan, I expect it to come. I've seen you getting beat up. But fishermen are lobbying for there to be consideration for a shortening of the grouper season, or the government's closure of the grouper season. With respect to farmers, I continue to call upon the member for Bamboo Town to lend whatever assistance his department can to our farmers. Moreover, as I have said previously and privately to the member, there is a need for urgent repairs to the roof of the parking house, an urgent need for a truck for the local head of department, an urgent need for boxes to park products, the need for cattle wire, fertilizer, etc. in the parking house. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for Seabreeze, who I had been pursuing for a social worker on the island. She informed me today that a social worker is being sent to Long Island, and Long Island will get an urban renewal center. Seabreeze, Long Island is most grateful. Mr. Speaker, the health of a nation is the wealth of a nation. I continue to lobby for repairs to both of the major clinics, reopening of satellite clinics run over various settlements, more staffing, consistent supplies of medication, the 2 ambulances pledged to us, and a lab or some means to perform blood tests and x-rays. Given that the morgue at the McKinsey's clinic has been out of commission for almost a year, I have teamed up with noted Long Islander Keith Carroll and, using the constituency fund, purchased the much-needed compressor to repair the morgue. Given that, I can say to Long Islanders that the inoperable morgue, where if anyone who died but lived in the central to southern parts of the island had to be transported 70 miles to Sims, I can say to Long Islanders that help and hope is on the way. The compressor is coming. Mr. Speaker, roads. You see, God Island. Mr. Speaker, whether it's our current lack of infrastructure or the deterioration of existing infrastructure and horribly worn-out roads, investors would likely be deterred from coming to Long Island. We need signage for various settlements, well, all the settlements, because the signs have been lost in hurricanes. We need resurfacing of roads, pothole repairs, sidewalk construction, parks, and green spaces. You know, as I drove about there and I realized we don't have any green spaces. We must address this, and I have been in close contact with the Honorable Member for Carmichael, and I feel most confident about his commitment to Long Island. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt that we will soon deem him an honorary Long Islander. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we continue to await worthwhile mailboat services at Clarence-Town. You know, I've expressed previously the problems we have faced with the mailboat service, from late arrival, the spoiled goods, poor service, the garbage being piled up on the dock, no food on the mailboats for persons who are being transported, etc. I encourage the member for Southern Shores to look into this and to, in his absence, I'll speak with him later on again about it, but I encourage him to look into this matter to resolving this vexing issue for Long Islanders. Mr. Speaker, I note here that while summer repairs have resulted in a facelift to some schools, there are 2 schools in Long Island in dire need of serious work. The NGM Major School is dangerous. and has become a fire hazard. The electrical situation is so bad that a parent called me last week and told me that during a PTA meeting, when she flipped a light switch, she was shocked. I have been in contact with Principal Mr. Endel Adley, who has had a 4-phase electrician review the school and cost repairs at $80,000. We must seek to address this to avoid a catastrophe. At the North Long Island High School, snakes and rodents occupy the new principal's office. The site is an absolute disgrace, with even the meter box falling off the wall. The school not only faces electrical issues, but walls are cracked and falling, and the physical plant is run down and near condemnable. Though we continue to lead the country in academic performance, Long Island schools are short-handed and in desperate need of teachers. For example, we have kindergarten students at the same school, but no teacher. And core subjects, which are tested at the high school, have no teacher. And you know, Mr. Speaker, this is of great importance to me because I'm also a former teacher. Mr. Speaker, there are broader structural problems with our public school system, particularly as it relates to the organization of the upper and lower primary school and the potential to perhaps consolidate the high school. This has become a reality in most other islands. What I am proposing has already been done in Exuma. In this way, I believe we can cut duplication of teachers in schools and perhaps get a better return of budget investment. It won't be popular, but back in the 1980s, there were 16 schools on Long Island. Today we have 7. One of them has 26 students, and I think the other one has less than 10. Who knows? It may cut 10% off the Ministry of Education's budget. Mr. Speaker, I also call upon the government to seek to make persons like Moni Cartwright and Beryl Fox, who've worked in the public service for many, many years, but have not been made permanent. These ladies, they work as janitresses at the NGM Major School. One of them is retiring next year. She's coming to retirement age. And notwithstanding all the years she has in the public service, she remains on contract. Mr. Speaker, the only solution to revive Long Island's economy is for that matter, the entire southeastern Bahamas, is for the government to take immediate action and declare these islands as hardship islands and provide tax incentives, from major duty reductions to periodic VAT exemption to 2-year business license exemptions to infrastructural improvements. These islands are depopulating and businesses are gradually closing. The government must also facilitate greater access to financing for small businesses on islands. Business loans are simply a pipe dream on the family islands. Moreover, I note that business people complain about the process of business license renewals and other government approvals that is frustrating and beset by delays and other obstacles, which can hardly lend to an ease of doing business in Long Island and other nearby family islands. People like Ann Knowles and Bonnie Marie have not received business licenses in years, and certainly not in a timely manner. The same applies to businessman Mario Cartwright and many others. We need a plethora of tax breaks and incentives to encourage investment and to jumpstart these economies. Mr. Speaker, Long Islanders have asked me to commend the Honorable Member for Kalani, our Prime Minister, for offering to assist the people of Dominica. One such person is Jill Smith, a co-owner and manager of the Stella Maris Resort, who has asked that I extend their offer to provide an apartment for a small family with kids if children are assigned to local schools. There are several others, scores actually, who have also offered to assist. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank Jill Smith and the Stella Maris Group and a group of concerned citizens headed by Mr. Larry Cartwright and head boy of the Lower Dedmaski Primary School, Mr. Stefano Fox, for their disaster relief efforts with respect to Ragged Island. Mr. Speaker, they were able to raise monies, park various items, and in addition to the churches, they had a number of things going for Long Island, not Long Island, Ragged Island, and those items have since been shipped to Ragged Island. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, Long Islanders are anxious and ready to see progress on our island. Long Islanders have told me that they are tired of lip service and false hope. We are in desperate need of substantive action. Again, I humbly thank Her Excellency for the speech from the throne, and I thank you, sir. And may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
As many. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Pine Ridge.
Thank you.
Just a moment, honorable member.
As many, the chair recognizes the member for Pine Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. I would like to extend my condolences, first of all, and sympathy to the family of the late Mr. Ken Motorboat Ferguson, who passed away after a very long time of illness. He's contributed to the junk canoe culture on the island of Grand Bahama for a very long time. Not only do I give my sympathy to his family, but indeed his extended family, the classic dancers. May his soul and the souls of all the departed rest in peace. Mr. Deputy, it is with valuation and gratification I join my parliamentary colleagues to thank Her Excellency the Governor General from this historic place, created for the people to legislate, formulate, authorize, or prescribe on the behalf of the people. Mr. Deputy, one of the obvious notions 2017 general election would have provided the global world, and indeed this region in particular, is that participatory democracy is very much vibrant in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. With our recent 88% voters turnout and a record of 175 candidates partaking in the election, the reality is Bahamians love politics and they comprehend the power of the vote. Mr. Deputy, it speaks voluminously about our people with regards to governance and government. This is foremost on their mind. It demonstrates that our people have a level of concern, commitment, compassion, and care for their country. Mr. Deputy, the government, through the speech of the throne, has set out to accomplish a very ambitious agenda. This parliamentary session should bring legislation for and on behalf of the people producing transition, transformation, and reformation, both in the public and private sector of our society. Mr. Deputy, there is no doubt in my mind the people of this Commonwealth voted for change and not more of the same. They did so overwhelmingly, making it crystal clear to all and in sundry that business as usual is no longer accepted. Mr. Deputy, they, and when I say they, I refer to the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. They, that is the people, did not send us here to major in the minor. They want real change. They want deficit lowered, bickering minimized, and a Freedom of Information Act with potency. They want an anti-corruption bill that's realistic for this nation, and a campaign financial reform that's coherent. They want term limits for prime ministers and members of parliament, an independent boundary commission, and a fixed election date. They want a judiciary where swift justice actually works. They want a national security that keeps us secure, and justice that puts murderers to death as presently mandated by law. They want an educational system and curriculum that produces national results, and a healthcare system that has beds for its patients. They want a government that will plead for the widow, care for the orphan, and elevate the poor. They want a government that will no longer seek to build a nation from the top down, but rather from the bottom up. Mr. Deputy, and I won't be before you long, but long enough to make my point and take my seat. Mr. Deputy, last but not least, Grand Bahama needs to be, through this government, the Grand Bahama Port Authority, the private sector, and its residents, needs to be energized. We need economic revival, renewal, and rejuvenation. Grand Bahama remains in the intensive care, metaphorically speaking. Grand Bahama needs and welcome economic incentives and vision from the Grand Bahama Port Authority and the government collectively. You've heard the biblical quotation, where there is no vision, the people perish. People in Grand Bahama are perishing, and they are depending on this government to save them. Many homes throughout Grand Bahama are still waiting on the government's assistance as it relates to roofing and structural repairs. Small businesses are shutting down, and far too many persons are working only 2 and 3 days, and the island itself is dilapidated in appearance. I would be remiss if I did not bring up the discussion and whispers many residents in Freeport as it relates to their ambiguous concern about the relevancy of the Grand Bahama Port Authority in this present climate. But that's for another time in this same place. To be continued. Grand Bahama, Pine Ridge in particular, wants me to remind this House and I heard it this morning, of this proverbial saying that my mama taught me, and most of y'all mamas taught y'all, and if you say not so, you are a lot, but I want to use a biblical term, and the truth is not in you. Which was, and is, charity begins at home and ends abroad. There's nothing wrong with that statement. But since we've been so Christian-like all day, let me continue in that vein. I will do my best. As a preacher, I often quote this text. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love thy neighbor as thyself. The reality of that text, without me macroponizing the text, is it is difficult, and I want you to hear me clearly, it is difficult for anyone to love their neighbor until they first learn to love themselves. I want y'all to understand me, and I am just the messenger. So don't shoot the message from the people who send me here as a messenger. While Bahamians stand in support of offering assistance to our fellow CARICOM neighbors in the face of tragedy and or natural disasters, Bahamians want to be assured that they or their needs are not overlooked or unattended to by their government in order to cater to the needs of another country. Now, I ain't get much amen, but I'll clap for myself. See, that was just to help you all along who really wanted to do that, but didn't have the guts to do it, but felt like doing it. 1 Timothy 1, since we've been Bibleizing all day, I will stick with the Bible and exegete all these texts. 1 Timothy 5 and 8 says, but if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he had denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. My dilemma, government, my party, my government, my people, my colleagues, my dilemma and quandary is that people in my constituency are in the same situation or worse and are yet to be attended to as those in Dominica. Not just my constituency, throughout the country. Some has not caught themselves since Hurricane Joaquin, Bimini, Michael, Rugged Island, Central Grand Bahama. People are living, and this is something I heard this week because the person came to see me. People are living out of their cars, and young Bahamians are disappointed because we made a promise during the campaign. Young Bahamians are disappointed because they couldn't get in to the University of the Bahamas because they didn't have nowhere to live. What we said we were going to do? Provide living. I work in a lone opposition. I work in a lone. I work in a lone. Don't get me in no more trouble. I work in a lone. I work in a lone, yeah. I work in a lone. I don't need y'all to put me in no more trouble. You know what I mean? Let me fight this battle by myself. No hard feelings. Mr. Deputy, right now, I'm crying for my people in this country. I'm not saying not to, and I want you not to get me wrong before you all start questioning my Christendom. But before you question my Christendom, let me remind every one of you in here and those of you watching me by television, nobody in this country got a heaven to put me in or a hell to keep me out of. I don't want you to think that I don't think we should assist the people of Dominica. But the route we are taking may cost us more in the long run. Now I understand emphatically well that during our dilemma, during Hurricane Matthew, they contributed $100,000 to assist us. We're grateful. Well, my view is the time has come that we should assist them. But my view, how? They gave us 100. Maybe we should give them 200. Now I hear the story about ain't no money. Well, I know the cabinet. And since we're talking about Christian, there's something called seed time and sow it. And there's enough folks in the cabinet who could underwrite that and not miss it. Seed time and sow it. So if we can't afford it, do it on our behalf. You see, I say that because unlike most politicians believe, Bahamians don't have a short memory. And if they do, let me remind you. I bet you all can't tell me where those folks are who we let out of the detention center from a country far south when we did that because they had an earthquake. Bet you we don't know where they are. I mean, I know where they are. They're somewhere around here roaming. And let me also bring to your attention another reality. We could have our problems too. But here's the harsh reality. When we have our problems, Bahamians don't run to the south. We run to the north because of our standard of living. So when you bring folks from south up here to another standard of living, what makes you think they can be in a hurry to go back from whence they came? And there's some other questions that have to be asked. Children are coming. Are they all immunized? Do we know their conditions? People are coming from south. Let me ask another question. They may be coming from south. But which one of you in this house will send your minor child to another country not accompanied by you? Who's coming with these children? How long they gonna be here? Assist, but don't put us in a deeper quandary. It may cost us more going the route we're going. I'm just putting it out there, things for us to think about. And then when you don't think about it, things that make you go, We are not less Christian for being good stewards of the place or the country God has put us in. Let me get back because I can see it's getting tight even though I know it's right. Mr. Deputy, for Grand Bahama, things are moving painfully slow. There seems to be a lack of cohesiveness as to which direction the island is going in, or the harsh reality that it's just not going. Mr. Deputy. The people of Grand Bahama are anticipating our government's resourcefulness, as outlined in the speech from the throne, to secure and strengthen the Grand Bahamian economy. Invigorating Grand Bahama puts us well on our way to fixing the entire Bahamas. You have to fix Grand Bahama because your second largest population is there. And if the economy there is crippled, I beg to tell you, it can't get much better anyplace else. That's your second largest population in the country. Grand Bahama looks forward to the establishment of an investment promotion board, stimulating Grand Bahama as a place for business and recreation. This is what we promise as a government. Grand Bahama awaits the repeal and replacement of the Port Area Investment Incentive Act 2016 to ensure that all licensees receive equal treatment under the law. This is what we promise. Grand Bahama looks forward to the development of Freeport as an offshore technology hub while promoting the island as a primary location for local and international films and television industry. This is what we promise. Grand Bahama's topography structure has the ability by way of interrelations to be industrial, touristic, and financial in a multifaceted global world. Grand Bahama awaits the government's inducement to establish a financial service center in Grand Bahama. Hence, I pray that our government will move expeditiously to fulfill and jumpstart its proposed plan for the island of Grand Bahama, which desperately needs our government attention. Let me pause and take this opportunity to thank the Prime Minister for appointing me as chairman of the Hotel Corporation. I am in charge of one hotel in Andros, and we hope to sell it. I am the caretaker of much property. I have no dealings in the negotiation of what takes place on the Lucayan Strip. I wish I did. But I just need people to know so that I don't get blamed for anything that has nothing to do with the thing that I'm in charge of. Her Excellency, Mr. Deputy, I wish to say, as I conclude and take my seat, Her Excellency read from the throne with such grace. She was magnanimous in her delivery, as usual, beautiful in appearance, and articulate in speech. Mr. Deputy, on behalf of the people of Pine Ridge, in the city of Freeport, on the island of Grand Bahama, in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, we thank Her Excellency the Governor General, Dame Lady Marguerite Penland, for her continuous service to nationhood. Mr. Deputy, much obliged. God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, its people, and resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Pine Ridge. As many. The chair recognizes the member for Pinewood.
Mr. Speaker, I would rise to thank the Governor General for her speech from the throne. That's okay. A wonderful speech from the throne. In our community of Pinewood, and as with myself, character counts. We respect authority, we honor portfolios, but everyone that comes to an office, that is a thing. That individual brings something to the office. Notwithstanding that it is a tradition in this honorable house, as a mechanism of honor, to thank the Governor General. As a young man who would have looked at our Governor General, Dean Marguerite Pinling, over these years, I've found reason to thank her not just traditionally, but sincerely from the heart. There is truly a difficulty to find someone more politically polarized than our current Governor General. She has served and has always been committed to those opposite. She has a history that stems back from, with all due respect, being a barefoot child in the Family Islands where nothing existed. Has served this country and has risen to the highest height. I say thanks not just for the reading, but for what I saw in the years leading up to this date. I've seen a lady who is exemplary of true bipartisanship, someone who had brought something unique to the office of Governor General that I actually commend. I've seen her, notwithstanding her grace and her commitment to the party to which she has served all of her life, stood in that office and executed the job of that office without bias, in my opinion, and without fear. I've seen her extend tremendous grace that I thought was notable. So when I say thanks to her, I remember back in time during our independence, when one of our cultural traditions is the cutting of the independent cake. And she made a decision that was just states ladyship. When the former Prime Minister was not able, for whatever reason, to attend that, she moved on, and she moved on with the then opposition leader. I thought that took courage, knowing that she loved the former Prime Minister. I have seen her operations and a kind gesture that added flavor to the Governor Generalship, as some would describe Princess Diana adding flavor to the monarchy. Her grace, her style, and her confidence with both sides of the aisle. So with that, notwithstanding her gracious reading and notwithstanding her contributions in terms of reading the speech from the throne, I want to say from my heart, thank you to our Governor General, who has motivated me to look even further beyond politics and realize, as all of us should, that the greater goal is the service to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like now to take a moment to just drift, because one of the hallmarks of leadership is listening. Listening. And Pinewood just had the fortune of coming in on the tail end of Pine Ridge. And I would like to speak into the ear of our Bahamian people so we can understand exactly where we are as relate to this matter of serving our fellow people in Dominica. First of all, let me make it categorically clear. Gratitude is not an issue draw. An issue draw is you get in it what you put in it. I don't care how you fatten the pot. Gratitude is gratitude. Period. And I think it's fitting that I should read in our ears to clarify to us exactly what our Prime Minister said? Because Pine would stand behind what he said 100%. We are in here, and from the time all of us came in here, we've been fighting what we promised in this election, and that has not stopped. God has blessed us in this country that we can go on with the business of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, rescuing the people in Freeport out of their cars, moving all around, and in less than 4 months, because the government had not even been sworn in until weeks after the general election, and that agenda still stands, and I'm grateful that we could still stand here and fight the issues of the Bahamian culture and extend our hand abroad to help somebody else. I am very, very grateful for that. And I will read what the Prime Minister said so we can get this thing right and understand what was said. The Prime Minister said the government proposes to temporarily relax the immigration rule for a number of students, school children of Dominica, who wish to continue their education in the Bahamas. Permits to reside in the Bahamas will be issued to students of Dominica who, with approval of their parents, wish to study in the Bahamas. Their parents must approve. It went on. There are 3 categories of students who may apply. Children who have relatives in the Bahamas. You're here legally. You're already here. You already have means to take care of yourself. Whatever category, they may be Bahamians, but you're here legally. And you can bring a relative over and take care of themselves. Resident, permanent residents, but you're here legally. And who can find lodging to support from family members. The same family members we are saying, if you love your family, we won't stop you from bringing your family to take care of your family in need. That ain't no burden on no government or anything that distracts from our agenda. I don't see that. The second category, college students who may wish to study at the University of the Bahamas and who seek boarding at UB. Now, we got children who are off to school, eh? I see no match or comparison to this to the detention center situation. If they were in a detention center, they was there for a reason, and it sure wasn't coming to school. So if you're here to come to school, we know where you're at. We know where you're going. We know what you're doing. The third one is children of parents employed in companies that exist here now. Your banks, your hotels, well, you know, if that's your family and you're working here and you're employed in a company here, you know what? We'll relax things so they can come and stay with you. And it says company, banks, etc., which have offices in the Bahamas. Temporary employment transfers can be arranged with these institutions. I see that as meaning also if there is a banking institution or something that was set up over there and they have a branch here in the Bahamas, we will encourage, if that branch is destroyed, don't fire the people, bring them here and let them work in your offices. Pinewood sees no way that this interferes with the government agenda to love, care, support, defend, return this country back on its good foot in any which way. I think character counts. And I support the position of the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas categorically, because it is the right thing to do. And I challenge anybody to ask me, what does this cost you? Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are those of us, like myself, who take this time serious, very seriously. When we came into office, and I made a pledge I'm not focusing on 10 years, I'm focusing on now. Tomorrow is not promised to me. I have a duty to do what I can do for Pinewood and my country now. Period. And whatever it takes, I have a duty to check my ego at the door. And where my opinion conflicts with the national good, I check that at the door. And the only thing that trumps that is the divine admiration. You know what? And since we're all theological, let me pull my degree out for a second and remind us of something called the law of first mention in Scripture. Whenever you have an issue, an interpretation of Scripture that goes afoul, go to the law of first mention. When Jesus was asked a question and trip him up about Moses and the divorce, he said, you know what? This was it from the beginning. From the beginning, it was brothers keepers. And if you have a question as to this to those who down south as being our family members, just go back a few hundred years. And the same way the mail boat drop off cargo along the way down to our southern islands, the same way our family and our brothers and sisters would drop off down those same Caribbean trains. And I challenge any Bahamian person who's kicking up and getting beside themselves, go check your DNA. And I guarantee you 4 to 5 Bahamian people have blood linkages all along the Caribbean chain. So we must check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. Before the same measure we measure out is the same measure that will be measured back to us as a country. We're not high because we're better. We're high because of the grace of God, our location, and we need to be careful because people measure us. We speak about crime and adding capital punishment. It's in law, and I'm not a lawyer, it's called a precedent. Someone went to Mauritius and interpreted one law, one word, and everybody on death row went free because we established a precedent. And I don't want my country to establish a precedent to say we are ungrateful, we are unthankful, and we won't bend in our moment in comfort to help somebody else. Not when I'm around. Because when my time comes, and I know it will come, I wish I have somebody I can just go to with a tear in my eye and don't have to beg and sell my soul to get a hand up or a handout. The Bahamas is better than that. And I stand wholeheartedly behind what our Prime Minister say, and I encourage all of us, get the facts, man. It's right here. So in the spirit of thanking our Governor General, I stand to acknowledge that Pinewood themselves realize that our nation and our community cannot grow if we keep throwing away 5-year cycles. I've had communications with the former Member of Parliament, Mr. Kalish Roll, and one of the things I said, I said, listen here, bro, quite frankly, I don't believe anybody has done all things wrong in 5 years. Tell me what you did good. Show me what needs to be built upon, what needs to be expounded. And I want to remind the nation that the direction of Pinewood is that we refuse to keep doing the same old thing and expecting a different result. Because if Pinewood, Reuben Ramming, could go crazy, I could do it all by myself. Because it's crazy for us to keep doing the same things and expecting different results. This is the time for all hands on deck. This is the time for Bahamian, as we said in the beginning, to have a sense of ownership in their country. If you have a good idea, if you have a good heart, then you're welcome to join the team. From before the election and shortly after, I'd already signaled to all those opponents that had challenged me in the election, and not even challenged me. They have challenged for the right to serve. And I looked at their character, I looked at their promises, and I said, you know what? We're going to use you. And today we're starting our Pinewood Festival, which is a festival of community and unity. And we must remember, you can't have community without unity. It's common unity. So with that, we're pushing to galvanize our people. And these 2 points I'll communicate to you, Mr. Deputy. First of all, at my invitation, we have invited all of those candidates in the May 2010 general election that competed for the right for leadership and 2017, and to demonstrate their love for Pinewood, to come and help me serve and develop Pinewood. And today, with the support of Kalish Roll, the former Member of Parliament, Alicia Hart, who was a former candidate in the Pinewood, Lincoln Beam, Mr. Glenn Roll, who was also a former candidate during the general election. We have all teamed up together. And we are creating the Pinewood Foundation, one of the visions we articulated before. Because I realize one thing, you know, the government is not a panacea. They can't provide all things. But there is a bigger, wider world out there of people who represent the character that I speak. They are willing to give money. They're willing to donate. So we are taking Pinewood community and we are building Pinewood community into an entity that will attract those altruistic givers, those grant givers, so that we could fill the gap where government would have fallen short. Persons like Kailash Roll is an expert in financial services. He has linkages, all of us have linkages. We will take all of our NGOs in our community, like our senior citizens home, and they will maintain their independence. But they'll be a part of the foundation, so when we do our grant writings and our requests for help and aid, the character of our nation, of our community, will attract the financial assistance out there to be able to help us with our boys' clubs, our girls' clubs, our crime-fighting initiative, that will provide us resources that transcends what we may be able to get from government from time to time. This will be a balanced, bipartisan initiative which will afford us the benefit of not only residents in Pinewood, but we will seek, for accountability's sake, the involvement of some of the best in Bahamian society to ensure that this work and function effectively. I also, Mr. Deputy, want to announce that also Pinewood will be establishing its first annual Pinewood Festival. And that is deliberately targeted to be on National Heroes Day. The reason for that is to galvanize our community and to create a time that is not so far removed from Thanksgiving or Christmas, where our community, just like the regatta festivals you will see in the Family Islands, will have a chance for an economic shot in the arm. A time for togetherness, a time to showcase the goods and the skills and the people of Pinewood, a time for togetherness. And I'm pleased to announce with that, we are also having the assistance of all those persons I just mentioned in the Pinewood Foundation. That is good simply because nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. And to be quite frank, I don't care whether you're on that side or this side or his side or her side. As long as your heart is right and your intentions are pure and your idea is sound, you're a brother of mine. And you're welcome to contribute to the good of Pinewood. Our festival will also herald an opportunity for us to celebrate the heroes in our communities. We will seek during our tenure to name our streets, our parks, whatever we can, after people that our children recognize, so that it can create value for them. I am grateful for the work and the dedication and the involvement of those persons who are partnered with us in the community and all those people in our community that work with all the other initiatives. Because I feel in my spirit an urgent need to get our crime-fighting initiative up and going, which is called, Mr. Deputy, the Pinewood Keepers. Very shortly, we will mobilize every Pinewood resident that is a part of our armed services, our defense force, our prison officers, our immigration officers, all of them, including the private security forces, in the first step to come together, bring their heads together, and we will create an internal crime-fighting strategy. Where there is an issue of trust in our community with communicating with the police, well, then you will find your own who you can communicate. Our police could be more effective if we were not only our brother's keeper, but if we were the most active intelligence-gathering source within our own communities. Because nothing happens within your community without somebody knowing. So we can do our part in reducing and creating a fear in crime to be around our community. In the spirit of thanks, Mr. Deputy, I want to take this time to acknowledge, you know, people see me with my hat a lot and they wonder about it, and it's not a cowboy hat, it's Australian. But it's a symbol to me, you know, Every time I put it on, it reminds me that, hey, Reuben, your head should be the same size before you're going in as when you come out. And the only way to avoid one's head from swelling is to have a vent called gratitude. You must have a vent called gratitude. I am not ignorant, sir, that there are persons that are now currently speaking well of Pine Wood. I'm not ignorant of the fact that when my Lord rode into Jerusalem, there was plenty hosannas as well. But I often tell my people, and I want to go on record in this place to let them know, that nothing happens without teamwork. The work that you applauded during the hurricanes and the drainage and the storm, it wasn't for a man in Carmichael called Desmond Bannister, and I told you this before, who has the back of Pine Wood. Where would we be? There are a lot of social ills and a lot of our people on rental assistance. And if it wasn't for a lady in Seabury, called Anisha Roll, where would we be? We are having an urban renewal manager and a representation from social services within our community, and that will be effective. We have dozens of young men now gainfully employed, so much so that someone sent me a voice note said, the guys aren't hanging out on the blocks no more, and when I see them, they dress up, they go someplace now. And it's because we have members like the member of Marathon, Ramal Ferreira, and the member for St. Barnabas, Shenandoah Cartwright, who has enabled those roadside contracts to be distributed, which are being executed by persons in the community, period. And I want to remind Pinewood that what you see going on that's good is simply because there is a good team in the caucus under the leadership of the Honorable Dr. Hewitt Alexander Minnis. And unless we have the spirit of gratitude, we too will not have the success that we seek. Pinewood is on a different track. We will not waste these 5 years, and we expect to have our flooding resolved, as I know it is in the hands of the Ministry of Public Works. We expect to see better in our community. We expect to see a change in the Bahamas. And I say again, get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready, because I expect the vision of this government to come to pass, and I expect the next budget to be better, and I expect this country to grow faster, and I thank God that there are no hurricanes to set us back, and in the meantime, we're going to help somebody else because we're grateful. Not only that we're bound for Moody's, but that we missed a storm that could have set us back a millennium. And I'm grateful that we're still on track for a better Bahamas. I want to thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for allowing me the chance to speak. Again, I give my gracious thanks to the Governor General and to the people of Pinewood. I want to say thank you.
Manning. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Tall Pines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I have this backwards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am reminded by the words of the member from Pinewood, who said that he wears his hat, Mr. Speaker, to remind him to keep his head the same size. And it's by coincidence that I come from your seat, Mr. Speaker, and back on this honorable floor, representing once again, Mr. Speaker, the good people of Tall Pines. Mr. Speaker, honorable members of this House, let me say once again that it's a pleasure to be here to represent the good people of Tall Pines. And I, again, Mr. Speaker, wish to thank the people of Tall Pines, my team, my wife, and my family for their continued support. Mr. Speaker, this is not an easy road representing our good people, but it is indeed an honorable road. and I thank them for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, Her Excellency, the Governor General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Dame Marguerite Painlin, on the 24th of May, 2017, delivered what is called a speech from the throne. In her aquamarine and most eloquent manner, Mr. Speaker, she wooed the crowd of the Bahamas once more. This has become commonplace for Her Excellency. We're used to that. And we thank her for her service and her brilliance, even at these challenging times in our country. And so, Mr. Speaker, beyond Her Excellency's elegance and her great delivery, we must ask ourselves, nonetheless, why is it so important that we gather here today to thank the Governor General? And my simple answer is this, Mr. Speaker. We as parliamentarians, sometimes we forget the path which we have promised. And so this gives us an opportunity to once again revisit our commitment and our promise to our constituents and to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. To look, Mr. Speaker, at the big picture of the government, and to pick out, even from that speech, Mr. Speaker, the things of importance to our particular constituencies. Mr. Speaker, that speech was indeed an important speech for this Commonwealth. And I'm happy, on behalf of the people of Tall Pines, to say thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you very much. The people of Tall Pines, and indeed the Bahamas, thanks you. Mr. Speaker, if I could sum up the theme of Her Excellency's speech, I would sum it up in this way. A speech from the throne speaking to reform and speaking to the modernization of governance in this country. Mr. Speaker, but before I address reform and modernization of governance in this country, I think it's first very important for us, Mr. Speaker, to focus again on the importance of our participation in regional affairs, and more particularly our participation in helping our neighbors. Mr. Speaker, I consider it a privilege to speak after the member from Pine Ridge, and then the member from Pinewood. And the listening Bahamians may interpret their speeches in different ways. Sitting and listening to the speaker from Pine Ridge, I would want him to be assured. Tall Pines understands where he is coming from. And I want to assure the member for Pinewood that Tall Pines in the Bahamas also understands where he is coming from. But Mr. Speaker, I'll always try to be the peacemaker in Tall Pines, Mr. Speaker. But both speakers spoke from a different angle. But Mr. Speaker, I'm one of those Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, who had the awesome opportunity, like the Honorable Prime Minister, like the member from Mangrove Key in South Andros, and like several others in this House, have studied in the West Indies, the University of the West Indies. I studied at both the University of West Indies Cable campus in Barbados, and like yourself, Mr. Speaker, and the campus at Mona in Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, while I lived in Barbados, I lived with Trinidadians. When I lived in Jamaica, Mr. Speaker, I lived with two ladies from the Turks and Caicos. Two ladies from the Turks and Caicos. Mr. Speaker, I repeat myself. Two ladies from the Turks and Caicos. Many may see that as a privilege, I did. But we learned from each other. We learned the importance of Caribbean unification, the importance of respecting each other and learning about how we live. Mr. Speaker, one of those ladies, by the way, since they're laughing, one of those ladies from Turks and Caicos later became Miss Turks and Caicos. One of those ladies, Mr. Speaker, one of those ladies, Mr. Speaker, became the first female premier of Turks and Caicos, Miss Charlene Cartwright Robinson. And I say that, Mr. Speaker, merely to illustrate who has Bahamian roots, merely to illustrate Grand Bahamian roots, merely to illustrate that we are one people. And we have an obligation. We talk about gratitude. We have an obligation as Bahamians, whether you're from Tall Pines, or from Pinewood, or from Pine Ridge, or from Nassau Village, we have an obligation, Mr. Speaker, to help our neighbors. Because we are our brother's keepers in the Bahamas. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to extend to my former roommate, Premier Cartwright Robinson in the Turks and Caicos, and indeed my family, my wife's family from the Turks and Caicos, South Caicos. Our prayers as they rebound from Hurricane Irma. I also want to share our prayers, the people of Dominica, and the people of Tall Pines in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I say, without question, Mr. Speaker, the people of Tall Pines support the Prime Minister and the government of the Bahamas' gesture to help the people of Dominica. Mr. Speaker, if I move now the governance, the Free National Movement, Mr. Speaker, again came to public office in 2017, fully committed to the principles of good governance through accountability, transparency, predictability, and participation. We continue, Mr. Speaker, to demonstrate these core principles throughout the first 3 non-consecutive terms in office. And even today, this new administration continues the pledge to continue at even greater level. Mr. Speaker, from the speech from the throne, our government promised and pledged several things. And the member from Pine Ridge spoke to them. After consultation with the electorate through a referendum to introduce an independent electoral commission, to establish a boundaries commission, to institute term limits on the Prime Minister, a system of recall for ministers or members of Parliament, to establish an office of Ombudsman, to amend the Public Disclosure Act, and among other things, Mr. Speaker. We remain committed to good governance and transparency. And yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Excellency made mention of these things in her speech on behalf of this good government. Speaker, we went even further, Mr. Speaker. We talked and we promised to restore this nation to the core values of self-discipline, industry, loyalty, unity, good governance, and abiding respect for Christian values and the rule of law. Mr. Speaker, I'm the son of a preacherman myself. I'm not going to go into any biblical quotes, but I think it's by chance that this opportunity for us to help our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean is a good opportunity for us to show our gratitude and to show what we spoke of from the speech from the throne, Christian values. Speaker, I want to also move on to talk a little bit, just a little bit, Mr. Speaker, about something that's passionate to me. That was also mentioned in the speech from the throne, which we thank Her Excellency for delivering. Speaker, I know you intend to establish a local government council in your constituency to work with central government to bring about effective change in Nassau Village, Mr. Speaker. And this council, I understand, will work with the various programs that you have established, your empowerment program in Nassau Village. And we, the people of Tall Pines, and I think the Bahamas, wish you the best in this regard. I must, however, do share, Mr. Speaker, that I do also have a yield for political reform and the strengthening of democracy in this country. Speaker, the speech from the throne spoke to this passion of mine. It spoke about introducing local government to New Providence. Speaker, at page 11 of that speech, it says, my government will establish a committee to look into the implementation of local government in New Providence. I again remind the people of this great Commonwealth that it was the Free National Movement under the leadership of the then Prime Minister Hewitt Ingram that modernized and enacted the legislation, the Local Government Act of 1996. This resulted in a new, revived form of local government on our family islands and in Grand Bahama, and a change, a positive change in the governance of our communities in those islands. Speaker, I've always expressed my love, my appreciation for getting people involved in the governance of their own community. Every opportunity I have, Mr. Speaker, I share it with people. When I go on the radio, when I do interviews on the streets, on the television, I always say to people, and I want to remind them today, I want to remind us today, that no member of parliament in this house, no matter how eloquent their speeches are, no matter how dramatized they may become, no matter how quiet, passionate they may be, Mr. Speaker, no MP, no minister, and I dare say no prime minister has all of the solutions to all of the problems. And this is where local government in New Providence can play a meaningful role, Mr. Speaker. I'm of the view that every Bahamian in Tall Pines, even in Angliston, in Cat Island, and Exuma, they're interested in serving their country. They're interested in being a part of change in their community. And therefore, when Your Excellency spoke of this government's intention of introducing local government to New Providence, it tied in with what I told the people of Tall Pines. That when we secure government in this country, that we will work towards that aim, so that not Dawn Saunders as their member of parliament will affect change in Tall Pines. It will be Dawn Saunders as their member of parliament, Mr. Speaker, but it will also be Susan Smith. It would also be John Major. It would also be the young 18-year-old or 21-year-old who has a vision for Tall Pines to participate. And so our young leaders would emerge. Our older leaders who was waiting for years on this opportunity will emerge. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I think we will see greater economic empowerment in our communities. And so, I say to Her Excellency, thank you for reminding us of this obligation. And I encourage this government, Mr. Speaker, to hold to that promise. The people of Tall Pines want to be a part of change through local government. Speaker, it would be remiss of me to not remind this honorable House of what the speech of the Thruins, from the Thruins spoke of at page 14 through 15. This government, Mr. Speaker, promised, and I quote, that it will enact legislation to expand the responsibility of the Minister of Environment to coordinate all national and international environmental obligations and activities. It further promised this, Mr. Speaker. It didn't say it might. It said, Mr. Speaker, and I speak to the good member and Minister of Environment, that it will set up a mechanism to respond to environmental accidents and emergencies, and to introduce liabilities for persons or institutions polluting our environment. It further promised, Mr. Speaker, that this F&M government not might, Mr. Speaker, will focus on the remediation of the New Providence landfill to maximize fires. Speaker, I promised the people of Tall Pines, if there's one thing that I would fight and fight every day for them, it would be to work with this government. Not to bash this government, to work with this government to ensure that we address the landfill issue. I say that because it's a priority for Tall Pines. And I will remind the good members, as I did in my inaugural speech, that there are communities that border Tall Pines that also are greatly affected. Kalani, Mr. Speaker, is affected. Garden Hills, Mr. Speaker, is affected. Southern Shores is affected. Carmichael is affected. The entire New Providence, I would argue, Mr. Speaker, is affected. Mr. Speaker, I've committed to the people of Tall Pines, and I'm so happy to say, Mr. Speaker, in this honorable House, that the Minister of the Environment and the Minister of Health have always welcomed my views and have always been cordial in sharing the way forward. And so on the behalf of the people of Tall Pines, as we thank Her Excellency, we want to thank the ministers for working with us. And to this end, Mr. Speaker, we held a very successful town hall meeting last month where the Director of the Environment and the Director of Health attended. We had hundreds of persons there, and they shared the government's vision and the government's work thus far, having regard, Mr. Speaker, to what the Pan American Health Organization report had said about the landfill, saying that it was an urgent public health hazard. You see, that was important for the people of Tall Pines, Mr. Speaker, because these are the people, and I say this respectfully, before the evacuation of the Southern Bahamas, I say this respectfully, the people of Jubilee Gardens were asked to evacuate, and they had to evacuate. I think that was maybe the first mass exodus or evacuation of persons in the community. So we understand the pain, and I say, Mr. Speaker, I want to remind this government of its commitment, and more particularly, Mr. Speaker, its short-term commitment. Speaker, they promised this as a short-term resolution, to develop a communication program in consultation with the community, to resume training by the Department of Environment and Health Service workers and refresher course, to enhance security, to provide resources for heavy-duty equipment, and to study the Freeport landfill. Speaker, I'm proud to say that much has been done in the landfill, and thus far, Mr. Speaker, we've been privileged not to have been battling any fires in Tall Pines. So we can continue in our efforts, and I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, that the minister reiterated the point that the government will be now receiving new RFPs to the public. Speaker, I want to remind them that I would be continuously pulling on their coattails. And I want to say to them that we can continue in this fight, Mr. Minister, through you, Mr. Speaker, that after the fire, Mr. Speaker, tractors pushed a barrier between the houses and Jubilee Gardens and the dump, the landfill. Speaker, I'm going to say to the minister, we cannot allow that barrier to grow up to the extent that it would affect the homes if there is to be a disaster again. Mr. Minister, my colleague, let's continue to keep that area clean, Speaker. Speaker, I want to say that we must stay committed to our commitment to enforcing and implementing waste-to-energy and recycling programs. Speaker, if I may move just quickly, Mr. Speaker, to some of the things that are happening in Tall Pines. I spoke about our town hall meeting where we addressed primarily the dump issue, but we were able to share with the people of Tall Pines some of our initiatives. Speaker, being able to speak with some of the property owners about how they keep their properties in those neighborhoods to make it safer and environmentally more sound. And I'm thankful that some businesses have already adhered to our cry and have started their cleanup efforts. Speaker, when I asked the people of Tall Pines to put their confidence in me, I told them that I would keep a headquarters open and I would introduce and implement a town community center. I'm proud to say, Mr. Speaker, our headquarters on number 42 Faith Avenue continues to be open. Our doors are always open, and I meet with my people, Mr. Speaker. I always said, Mr. Speaker, that there's no reason why a community like Tall Pines didn't have a community center, and we're in the process of filling all of our desks there, Mr. Speaker. We said that we'll implement a homework center, a computer lab, a library, a job readiness center. We have some computers in, Mr. Speaker. We're getting the books in, and I'm guaranteeing you, Mr. Speaker, within a few weeks, we will open that center once we have secured the building a little better, we're going to move and open our community center. We promised, Mr. Speaker, an outreach committee. We have formed that. We've already visited and participated in the churches in our community. We visited, for example, Christ Community Church when they held their health fair. And we were able, Mr. Speaker, to provide over 150 backpacks and book back-to-school supplies to students there. We're able to participate, Mr. Speaker, through this community outreach program by giving over hundreds and hundreds of sandbags from our headquarters. And then on the second day, Mr. Speaker, in preparatory to Hurricane Irma, not only gave hundreds of sandbags from the headquarters, we drove around the community and gave the persons who are not able to come. Our outreach program is working. Our Community Beautification and Cleanup Committee, we have started. Even before parks and beaches started their work, we started already, Mr. Speaker, with the Jubilee Gardens Park, and have committed hundreds of dollars in getting that up to speed. Speaker, our bridges have begun to be cleaned. Our Education Committee is working hard, Mr. Speaker, in Tall Pines. During the summer, we visited the Southwest Police Summer Camp, where I spoke to the young people there, over 130 students there. We provided lunch for them. We also, Mr. Speaker, did a second back-to-school drive at our headquarters, where we, along with Alive, and I thank Alive for partnering with us, and gave out several hundred other bags and school supplies. Speaker, we don't have a school in Tall Pines. We don't have a school in Tall Pines, but in the spirit of gratitude, we've adopted, Mr. Speaker, Garvin Times. So we have met with the principal of Garvin Times. We have committed to helping them out. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I was invited the first day of school, and we presented Garvin Times with a much-needed PA system and a podium, which the school needed. So our committees are working. Speaker, our Crime Watch Association and Community Association is working, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to say on the 15th, I've already met with the executive team of a newly formed High Tree Estates Community Association. I've already met with them. Speaker, on the 15th of October, they'll be launching their first program, their cleanup in their community. When we spoke about change in Tall Pines, Mr. Speaker, we wasn't talking just to hear ourselves. We work together in Tall Pines, and we're going to deliver for the people of Tall Pines. Speaker, just before I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that, but let me first say this, that we have, like yourself, Mr. Speaker, I saw that you have a newsletter. You have a newsletter, Mr. Speaker, called the Nassau Village Informer. And in that, I have read all of the copies, Mr. Speaker, and I see that you have programs going there, your empowerment programs, Mr. Speaker. I see that you're about to do your cultural event in the next few weeks. I see that you have, Mr. Speaker, have already done some street cleaning in your community, at least 4 parks, I understand, Mr. Speaker. And I see that you're working with your young people. But we're doing the same thing in Tall Pines. We have the Tall Pine News. And that's a mechanism by which we're going to continue to show the people of Tall Pines the work we're doing and where we want to partner with them. Speaker, I talked about your cultural fest, which is scheduled, I see, for the 11th to the 15th of October. So I want to encourage you to do your part. Mr. Speaker, in my last 5 minutes, seeing that I had to sum up some points, I want to speak to something that's very important. Speaker, you this morning spoke about the historical aspect of this great place. Speaker, I love this house. I want to start off by saying this. I love this honorable house. And I thank the people of Tall Pines for placing me here. And while we boast about the history of our political democracy, we have to ask ourselves, are we truly in a place where we should be in terms of the development of parliamentary democracy from this place? And I say that, Mr. Speaker, because when I travel the world, I always stop at their assemblies. And I'm always marveled at their assemblies. And then I come home, and I'm going to repeat myself, I love this place. And I come home, Speaker, and I see the place from where we speak on behalf of Tall Pines and the behalf of the Bahamas. I wonder if we maximize our Westminster parliamentary system in this place by maximizing the use of parliamentary committees, whether it be foreign affairs, education. Are we promoting and enhancing those when we talk about reform? Speaker, I'm always marveled how, and I don't want you to think, Mr. Speaker, when I sit, my legs or one of my legs is out. I'm not trying to rush to get to your seat. But unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, I sometimes accidentally, play footsies with the member for Pine Ridge. I said accidentally, Mr. Speaker, because I speak of this place. Mr. Speaker, the table space here, Mr. Speaker, is inadequate. I'm trying to make a point. And I love Pine Ridge. And all the time, Mr. Speaker, I accidentally touch shoulders with the member from Pine Ridge. And I love Pine Ridge, and I have no issues with that. And Mr. Speaker, the member from Exuma and the member from Mangrove Key, and all of your staff, we fight for this one plug in this corner, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, every time someone moves in the gallery, Mr. Speaker, all of us shake. There's not enough room for the public. The cameras are outside. We had to dismiss because the system not working properly. Now I remind the Bahamian people, I love this place. But Mr. Speaker, there's a time for retirement, even for some great buildings and some great places. There's a time, Mr. Speaker, when we have to modernize where we work from on behalf of the Bahamian people. Speaker, I know I'm not the first person to speak to this issue, but from where I sit as a deputy speaker, I think some of us have to champion this cause once more. Speaker, and let me say this, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, let me say this. You cannot expect a doctor, Mr. Speaker, to be called to deal and heal a sick and an infected person in a toxic, ill-equipped hospital or operation room. Speaker, we cannot expect better grades from our students when we can't provide them with safe, clean classrooms and proper and educated teachers and staffs. We cannot, I don't care how bright our pilots are at Bahamas Air, we cannot, Mr. Speaker, get a safe trip to Freeport if we're using old and outdated aircrafts. Mr. Speaker, and I love this place. And I thank Tall Pines for bringing me here. But I say, Mr. Speaker, this hospital is not properly equipped. This school is not properly equipped. This aircraft is not the most modern one. We need reform even in this place. We need a state-of-the-art House of Assembly and Senate chambers, where our members and their staff, Mr. Speaker, when I come here almost on a weekly basis, I'm shamed at the conditions. Speaker, we have to modernize our broadcasting here also, Mr. Speaker. When you walk across the room, Mr. Speaker, the system we use, they're cardboards covering the system. We have to bite the bullet and move in a modern House of Assembly and Senate chambers. And so, Mr. Speaker, I say that because I know that it needs to be said. And some people might not have the political will to say it, but I'm going to say it. We need reform even in this place. And the time for it is now if we want to properly serve our Bahamian people. Speaker, I thank the people of Tall Pines again for graciously allowing me to serve them in this place. I graciously thank Her Majesty again on behalf of the people of Tall Pines for her speech from the throne. We pray for our brothers and sisters, Mr. Speaker, in the Caribbean, and we welcome and look forward to helping them in the very near future. I say, Mr. Speaker, God bless Tall Pines, and God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do move at this time that the House suspends until tomorrow, Thursday, the 28th at 10 a.m.
Do we have a seconder? Second. It has been moved. As many? As many? Chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael.
Speaker, I rise to wrap up this debate. Speaker, I will not be as long as I anticipated. I didn't anticipate speaking at all tonight. I was to speak next week.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been in dialogue, and I'm embarrassed that I have to be saying this, having regard to the communications between myself and the leader of government business in the House, and the usual conventions that govern the communications between the two sides. We have an agreement that that one of our members will, at least one or two, will speak tomorrow. And the concern is this, Mr. Speaker. We've had a whole day of, we're talking about the speech from the throne, which speaks to a number of policy initiatives which are ministerially driven. And today we've heard from one minister. Out of how many ministers are there? 100. Someone said hundreds. No, that's not, Mr. Speaker. I'm addressing the Speaker, man. On a point of order, you are seeking to close the debate.
You all have an arrangement that you're going back on it.
No. I have a WhatsApp message. Mr. Speaker, I've been in dialogue with the leader of government business on what will happen tomorrow, and also an indication as to who will be the first speaker tomorrow on his side. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm very surprised that there is this, they're not on the same page on that side. The concern is this: the speech from the throne has a number of ministerial representations on the environment. We heard from the Minister of the Environment on crime, on the economy, on Grand Bahama, on very serious matters. We've not heard on any issue relative to those matters. So there are four of us here. We would like to be in a position to speak substantively to the policy matters. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm quite surprised now that the government, who's had the whole day, we've cooperated thoroughly with their agenda. We've gone back on the agenda. We've done a lot of things in a cooperative spirit. I'm very surprised now that they're seeking to. I'm very surprised now, Mr. Speaker, having regard to the cooperation that has come from this side, that we are now at this juncture with the government. And so I'm wondering whether, sorry? Okay, thank you.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the nation would like to hear from,
Honorable members.
of our members, inclusive of the opposition, we do not have a problem if the opposition feel that they're being compromised and they had an agreement and were breaking the agreement. As gentlemen and ladies, what we would ask is that you reserve, and tomorrow we can always yield. Which means that you reserve your spot, and tomorrow we yield so that we would speak rather than you speaking.
I understand that. The Prime Minister is suggesting that we do something other than what we've agreed, and then tomorrow we'll do something back to what we agreed. And that doesn't, I'm just wondering why we're going that route. Speaker, I'm asking that we will likely have 2 people speaking tomorrow. 2 members on this side. We would just like to hear some substantive contributions on the speech from the throne and the status of where we are. Sorry? The what, sorry? He was very substantive. He was very substantive. No, but in all seriousness, Mr. Speaker. No, but I'm saying, just yield. We have a position, Mr. Speaker. We have a position. Now, if it's not reliable, then this is we're only 4 months into a 5-year term. We have to be able to communicate with each other, Mr. Speaker. And we have cooperated with the entire day's agenda. And last week we cooperated with what the government's agenda, things in circumstances when our consent was required. We've cooperated. And so I'm just wondering why we're at this standoff now.
Honorable members, leader of the opposition business. Is it the position of the opposition then that the opposition is not prepared to lead off the...
No, that's not the position. We're prepared. I can go right now, Mr. Speaker. That's not the point. We have an agreed position. Mr. Speaker, you have that expression on your face, Mr. Speaker.
I'm only asking.
Yes.
So, for
No,
clarification...
because you're saying not prepared. It's not a question of not being prepared. The question is, the issue is...
I didn't raise the issue of preparation.
Because you're prepared.
My only question was...
Yes.
Would the opposition... Is the opposition position that they would like to hear from more ministers opposed to
Yes.
Speaking in the lead-off position tomorrow morning?
Speaker, no, the position is that we had an agreement with the other side, with the government, on what would happen tomorrow. And that's the position. And the position was premised on the fact that there are 4 of us, there are 35 members. We've heard from many today, and only 1 has been a minister. We're speaking on substantive policy initiatives. The question is, are the ministers ready? I think that's the question. Are the ministers ready? Because we are expecting for ministers to speak to substantive matters. You're going to, thank you.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Marco City.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to reserve my place for tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.
Thank you, honourable member.
No, I had promised them my vote, but now I've given it to you.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I once again rise to attempt to do what was done before, which is to suspend the House until tomorrow at 10 a.m. The member for Marco City has reserved his position. And so we will suspend tomorrow until 10 a.m., Thursday the 28th, where the debate on the resolution will ensue.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House suspend to 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Thursday, the 28th of September. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will rise. The business of the House stands suspended until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Thursday, the 28th of September, 2017.